feels like not when it wasn't party time. I didn't pick up the differential. All right. Well, I guess we're apparently on party time now. I think I speak for the entire group when I say yippee. So that works out well. Corey, good seeing you. So we were saying before, like, why am I a big believer on this? Because I've just seen the skills of the recruiter, like the dividend pay 200 to 300%. So we're moving all through the academy. We started out with lead generation. We went into process design and execution. Now we're moving to how do you actually quarterback the process and kind of what skills you need to have. And that's what the next several modules are going to be. But if you practice these, I do see a 200 to 300% dividend on deal flow. The biggest dividend I've ever seen is when I worked with, anybody know Michael Mudd? So Michael Mudd worked with me for a bunch of years, and he was a marginal recruiter, I'm going to say at best. And the one skill that we worked on was listening and interview technique. And when he got it, all of a sudden, his results went up 300, 400, 500%. And then he's been kind of setting the standard ever since. So this is the same stuff that I worked on with Michael. So the two skills we're going to focus on today is active listening and interviewing, and then we'll do some role plays, so we can see what these techniques look like as they're being practiced in the field. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick listening exercise. Leslie, I think I've done this with FranNet, right? The sheep exercise, wolf exercise. Okay, yeah. So everybody have a chat box. Everybody in the chat box, right? So get your chat box ready. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a listening exercise, and we're going to solve a simple math problem. All right. So here it is. Now listen carefully. There are 30 wolves and 28 sheep. So how many wolves did not eat sheep? Put it in the chat box. I'm looking. So we got 10. What else? 9. It's not a countdown, Jason Weed. 8. All right, great. Now we got that's when you say party's starting. Is this your definition right. Of party tricks? That's great. Thank you very much.
On theme.
Okay, Christian says we don't know the answer. Christian, you do know the answer. You just didn't listen. Joel, zero idea. Joel, you have 100% idea if you just listened. And Bryce never said anywhere eaten. So far off base, I don't even know where to begin. Damon, 22. No, you weren't listening. Okay. Got it. So there's only one person listening. So we're going to say it again. Here we go. Remember, this is the listening part of the listening exercise. We all got that? And I said it was a simple math problem, which apparently nobody heard. Okay, so anywho, let's try it again. So there are 30 wolves and 28 sheep. So how many wolves didn't eat sheep? And I was meticulous in my diction, despite I have a New England accent. Tyler Gordon, 10, good. Christian Clucci, 2, you failed. Bryce, 20, not even close. Bryce, oh wait, he's trying to seize it back. Corey, clean up your speech, says the guy from Idaho. Okay, all right. So thank you. So here's the right answer. The right answer is 10. So here's the math. So there's 30 wolves. I'm putting it in. There's 30 wolves. All right. And 28 sheep. And that will equal 10. Here we go. Ready? Just put it up. So there's 30 wolves and 28 sheep. So 10 didn't eat sheep. So the whole point of the exercise, right, is that you would hear A-T-E, pardon me, E-I-G-H-T instead of A-T-E, right? So that's, so now let's talk about why that phenomenon even occurs, right? Because what you don't know about conversations is you're in a monologue pretending to be in a dialogue. And that's what it is to talk. So in every conversation, there's three conversations going on, right? So there's the conversation you're in with the candidate, which may or may not have anything to do with reality. There's the conversation the candidate is in with themselves. And then there's the conversation you're in with yourself, right? And that's how we get into 28 Sheep. It's the conversation you're in with yourself, which had nothing to do with anything I said. But it looks like it does. And then we don't test the veracity of what it is we heard. We just assume we're right. And then that creates the mischief. Now, a typical recruiter, like, how does that play out in recruiting, right? A lot of times we just don't listen. Now, I will tell you, I'm going to ask the people to put it in the chat box, right? So in these conversations, the three conversations that are up on the screen, where's the purchase decision made? Conversation 1, 2, or 3? Everybody writes 2. That's correct. Because remember, we talked about at the very beginning that people don't buy a business really, right? They're not buying a franchise really. What are they buying?
A future state.
So to flush that out a little bit. So you're right.
Well, they're not buying a drill, they're buying holes. And holes is their the how they want their life to look that's better than the way it looks today.
Right. So not to put words in your mouth, they're buying their own narrative, right? Of how their business, their finances, their life, their community, how everything changes if you guys do business together predictably, right? So they're buying their own narrative, right? So unless we have access to conversation number 2, where the candidates in the right, unless we have access to that, then we can't influence the buy decision. And that's, I think, one of the real skills. People like Leslie, who's been doing this for a dog's age, and is a top producer, and Corey Bowman, who's on the phone now, and even Bryce. I've worked with Bryce over the years. That they bring to the table. They're really good at making conversation 2, pulling it into conversation number 1, right? So in other words, making the conversation you're in about the conversation they're in, with themselves. So it'd be things like, even something as simple as like, Bryce, I see you nodding. So why are you nodding?
Because I agree with everything you're saying here. It's resonating.
So that would be me pulling conversation number 2 out, right? So in one way, you could just say what you see. Like, I just saw you lean back in the chair. Rini, I just saw you lean back in your chair. What were you thinking? Hope you're on mute. I think she was thinking how you get off of mute.
There it went.
I was thinking Bryce was just tired, and that's why he was nodding.
That's only when I'm talking to him. He just says, yeah.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, I agree. I agree with what Bryce was saying.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I track this all to the fall of humanity. It's right. When we get too far away from God, bad stuff happens, right? So anyway, long and short of it is, this plagues, right? And it affects decision making. So here's another exercise. Okay, put in the chat box, if you would. What do you see? The 3 Pac-Man, that's right, Max? That anybody who's too young to know what Pac-Man is, that's the video game that goes wagga, 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 wagga. And then when they get eaten, they go like that. Okay. A triangle and 3 Pac-Man, white triangle. Okay. Did I ever tell you guys I was a fine arts major and I sucked? And that's how I got into business. Did I ever tell you that? So I was an artist, graphic artist. And I was one of the guys that, you're really good in high school. You're the best in high school. Then you go to college and everybody's was the guy who was best in high school. And then you're just middle of the road and you say to yourself, I'm never going to make a living. I don't want to be a struggling artist. So you do hurry up offense and you do something else. Now, there's a reason I'm telling you this, right? You do not see a triangle because there is no triangle there. It doesn't exist. Now, here's what's fascinating. So graphic artists are trained on this stuff, right? It's a technique called continuation. Now, continuation is you get a line here, right? You get a line here, and you swear to God, there's a line from here to here, except that line doesn't exist. But you see it. It's like right there. And then you gotta say to yourself, wait a second, that line doesn't actually exist. Right? So what does it do? You're seeing a line that doesn't exist, and then you got to make yourself not see what's not there. And then we call that living, communicating. It's so messed up, but that's how the brain works, right? So part of the brain works. We'll see how that works in franchise development, right? They get a little piece of information, another little piece of information, another little piece of information, and they think they have the whole story because, again, they buy narrative, okay? And then they create an assumption. Except in the mind of the franchisee, it's not an assumption. It's the truth. Now, the way the mind works is if you have a belief or if you have an assumption, you still have access to it, all right? It's pliable, it's malleable, you can hear dissenting opinion. When you have a truth, it goes into the background. And you don't really have access to it anymore because it's true, right? So what do we know is true? Fill in the blank. Somebody type this. Okay, the sun blanks in the east and blanks in the west. Fill it in. So the sun blanks in the east and then blanks in the west. What's the blanks? Rises and sets, right? Okay. Except it doesn't. So the correct answer is the sun maintains the illusion of rising in the east and maintains an illusion of setting in the west because the sun's stationary, right? The earth revolves around it, right? Again, truth, you don't have access to it. You don't even examine it, right? You just assume, it's true and then kind of off you go. Now, I will tell you, and I will promise you, candidates do that with businesses, right? So they take a little piece of information, they craft the truth, and then they lose their ability to examine it. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay. They see a little bit of competition. Then there's way too much competition. And my new friend who works in the pickleball realm, that's one you're going to see, right? Way too much competition. I can't make enough money. Why? Maybe they've talked to a couple of franchisees, which may or may not represent the norm, and they hear their financial objectives. Not that they'll say it can't be met, but they don't ask how. How can it be met? And then the last is, anybody have the fascinating one where the franchisees area is like a black hole in the United States and nothing works. It has its own set of rules and its own set of laws of nature, and it's its own set of quantum physics, where concepts work everywhere but there. Do you ever hear that one? I probably told you this, but I was one of the first recruiters for Subway. When Subway had just a few hundred units, and that was my first job out of school. And I got there when they had about 350 units, and they were in about 17, 18 states. And they weren't in places like Tennessee, and they weren't in Alabama. And I remember I was tasked with bringing Subway to Alabama. And I remember distinctly this conversation I had with this good old boy down somewhere around Huntsville. And he said, you know what, Yankee boy? This is Alabama. We don't eat Yankee food down here. Nobody eats sub sandwiches. It won't work. And you know what? He was right. Because at the time, it was Yankee food. I happen to be a Yankee, proudly. And people didn't eat sub shops in Alabama until Subway went down there and introduced the product and then went around the world changing the way the world eats. So the guy was right. Okay. but his assumption was it will never work here, and that proved to be a fallacy, right? So those are the things, that we come up against with less, I'll call less sophisticated buyers, but that we have to challenge, right? We got to take their truths, right, and then turn it into a belief and then debate it. And we'll talk about what those techniques look like too. Questions on that before I start moving away from theory into practical application? Okay. So my big takeaway, I want you to take away from this particular session, one, is how crazy the buyer is, right? And two, how crazy you are, right? So, and then somehow, we got to work together and create something functional out of dysfunctional senses and thought processes, which kind of makes it fun, again, and which also makes it an acquired skill, right? So, I'll tell you, this came out of an article, this pyramid came out of an article, I designed it. After I was working with Michael and his big breakthrough, I just started looking at and talking to him, like, how did his listening change? Because it was so obvious that it did. And then I could see he kind of went through 4 layers, and I'll just kind of like share that with you. So I'll call the lowest layer of listening is just hear what people are saying. And I'm going to say that that's very ordinary and very trite and not enough to get the job done, because what we're doing is far too complex and far too difficult. So you can't stop at just hearing what people are saying. There's also more elevated listening. You hear what they're saying, but you also hear what they're not saying, right? And that's something, if you've ever had a conversation, I heard that you're interested in X, Y, and Z, but I expected A, B, and C. You didn't say that. Why is that, right? It's another way to get to better understanding. There's even the next highest level is you could actually hear and you can call forward that truth or those assumptions in the background, right, that are creating the conversation in the foreground. Like, so to use the example that I talked about, with the good old boy in Alabama at the time, when he was telling me that it's all Yankee food, I could have just said to him, I didn't have the skills at the time. So I hear you don't believe the concept works. I hear you believe there's a fatal flaw in the model that's going to stop us dead on the Mason-Dixon line. Let's discuss that, because they'd already been established in Florida. They were established in other southern markets. So that I could have had an open debate about at the time. I think I just laughed and hung up the phone because I was 21 and I had a pile of leads and I had other stuff to do. So anyway, not proud of it, but I was 21. All right. So then lastly, it would be, I think the highest state of listening is listening, but also giving the candidate the experience of being completely heard and understood. And we'll talk about techniques for that. Now I'm going to say, well, why is that important? Okay. So I'm going to ask you to use the chat box, because, we're in a field where you're talking to people all day long, every day, right? So now you're in a conversation all day long, every day. When is the last time you had the experience where you said to yourself, wow, they completely get me? Put it in the chat box. When's the last time you remember that? I think my wife's on the phone. I expect I heard her right today. Just for marital bliss, even if it's not true. For those of you who don't know, Tara Merchant's my wife, and she's also in franchisee recruitment, and she's on the phone with us today. And she didn't answer. Okay. So let's see. So she's on, I don't even think she's on level 4 yet. So in this conversation, but nobody put anything because maybe you're not having that experience. And my question to you would be, what if you gave everybody that experience? And there's techniques for that, like called playback. I could say, like, Corey, let me tell you what I just heard. And I want to make sure I heard it right. And if I didn't hear it right, just correct me. And you just play back who that person is, what they told you. I do that at the end of every interview for a client. I do that I got back into recruiting, so we could teach these classes and got back into the trenches a bit, is for those of you who don't know, I'm actually recruiting franchisees for Sandler sales training now, right? So I would do a lot of playback, and it's the pixie dust you sprinkle on the end of the conversation to make it magical. Just hearing isn't enough. Communicating that you heard takes the relationship to a whole different level. And we'll use playback technique today, but I would encourage you all to implement that immediately. Okay. Now we're going to talk about what gives you access to somebody else's world. Like when they're 28 sheeping you, how do you know you're even being 28 sheep? How do you know they're operating from misperceptions? How do you know they've made decisions or made assumptions that may or may not be based in reality, or may or may not be in their own best interest? How do you know? Your access to their reality, okay, is through your interview technique. You got to ask questions. So if you want to be brilliant in this role, you got to be brilliant in interviewing. And if you're not brilliant in interviewing, you will not be brilliant in this role. You could be average, and hopefully that's enough. And hopefully the leads or the brand or the ROI or the franchisee community can pull you through. But you, the brand will not get on your shoulders, and then you can't march them down the line and get more deals done because you're good at what you do. So there's two types of questions that you'll ask. So open-ended and close-ended. So anybody, this is the interactive part, so you can all come off of mute. What's an open-ended question, and why would you use it?
I mean, it's a question that is not easily answered with yes, no, maybe. Like it inspires an explanation behind the answer.
Right. So perfect. Right. So it invites conversation. Right. So it's not yes, no, or a finite number of answers. It's really to get somebody to engage them in conversation, let them run their choke out. Okay. And really to sift through to get some information. Very good. 100% right, Leslie. Closed-ended questions. What's that? And why would you use it?
When you're looking for a specific data,
Okay. And what will that give you?
an answer, a specific
Right,
answer.
clarity, right?
Clarity.
So open-ended questions, you can ask a clarifying open-ended question, but as a general rule, right, open-ended questions is to get information for you to sift through, okay? And then closed-ended questions is going to help you with the sorting and get to priorities, get the specifics, and get the clarity, right? So, the interview technique often is to start open-ended and then work towards closed-ended, which when we do in role play, you'll see that, right? So the open-ended free flow of information is, why are you looking to start a business? Now notice there's no right or wrong answer there. Why don't you own a business now? That's the devil's advocate question, right? What stopped you in the past? How will you know that won't stop you in the future? Stop, right? Let them go. So those are open-ended questions designed to solicit more volumes of information. And then clarifying questions and closed-end, have you been approved for financing? And that's what Corey was talking about. Open-ended questions start with like who, right? That's when you want to know, who's doing what, right? You got to get the body. Who is it I'm working with? You're trying to identify identities that you're going to be doing business with, or who's responsible for something. And then what questions design, I think, to solicit more understanding. I like what if questions too. That's, I think, really underutilized in franchising, right? So I can't make $100,000 in this business. Well, what if you could? Would you be interested? What if I could point you to a franchisee who's hitting the goals that you're hitting, Would you have that conversation? Right. Or I need to protect the territory, or what if we resolve that issue? Now, would you be ready to sign the franchise agreement? Right. So, what if questions take an objection? You could put them past the objection, okay, and see if that resolves the issue. Or you say you want X, Y, and Z. What if I can get that for you? Do we have a deal? Right. So it creates hypotheticals, but if they don't immediately say yes, then there's more there, right? So that maybe you have or haven't discussed, or they're 28 sheeping you. And then you could say, well, I didn't hear an immediate yes, I heard hesitation. So, right, that's again observing, what's behind the hesitation, right? When I don't see a lot of recruiters use when. We've mystery shopped 200 people probably in the last 20 years, franchise salespeople, and almost none of them ever ask us when we're going to turn in an application. When will we review the FDD? When will you have time to fill out the application? When will you have time to contact the franchisee? They just tell us that, say it's the next step, and then they just leave it hanging. Right? Anybody know the Cialdini principles? Read the Principle of Influence, or the Principles or the Psychology of Influence. Dr. Robert Cialdini. I got a chance to study with him because I'm a geek and I do crap like that. I flew out to Arizona and I got a chance to study and learn the principles of influence. I don't really learn stuff by reading a book. I'm more of a haptic learner, which means I got to mess around with stuff or I'm not going to learn anything. That's why I was a B student at school and I really couldn't figure stuff out until I got into the workplace and started messing around with stuff. But the Cialdini principle is he measures influence. Now he defines influence as what can I do or say over here that creates an action over there. That's how he defines influence, right? You're not in control, but what is stimulus and response? So what stimulus can I provide over here that somebody responds with a desired action over there? So there's one Cialdini principle is he calls it continuity. And what it basically means is what it is to be a human being is you want your words to have integrity. In other words, you want to back up your words with actions. You want to be known as somebody who does what they say they're going to do, right? So if you say to somebody, by when will this occur? Okay, and the Cialdini principle is get them to articulate it. I will do that by September 15th before the end of business day. Great, let's both write that down. Now that creates a deadline, right? Now what do deadlines create? Urgency. And what does urgency create? Action, right? So that's the Cialdini principles at work, right? I'll give you kind of a quick story. I raised my kids way up in the Berkshires in the northwest corner of Connecticut, kind of where Norman Rockwell used to paint, kind of a little snow globey hamlets of Connecticut, rural. It was 7 miles and 20 minutes for me to get a gallon of milk. But and the play out was there were more bear than bad guys, right? So my kids had a pretty safe little lifestyle. But I remember I was going into town and my son said, Dad, would you get me a candy bar? And he's a really good kid. And I wanted to reward him. I said, absolutely, I'll get you a candy bar. So I drive into town, go to the grocery store, come back, and my son says, well, where's my candy bar? And I'd forgotten. And he said, Dad, you promised me you were going to get me a candy bar and you didn't do it. Now, this is the Cialdini principle. Do I know I promised him that I would get him a candy bar? Right? Candy at the time was probably $1. Gasoline was $4, right? So I get in the car, I go back to town, I come back an hour later, burn $5 worth of gas to get $1 worth of candy because that's what I said I would do. That's the Cialdini principle. If somebody reminds you of something you said and you didn't do it, you're wired to make that the next priority. Fact. And he measures this stuff. So I'm very when I'm working with a recruiter, I'm very into making sure that everything is agreed on, deadlines. I don't give them the deadlines because they don't give a rip on what my deadline is. I ask them for their deadline. So they're saying it. That's the Cialdini principle. You know, Joel, by when will this occur? And then Joel says X, Y, and Z. And you can even say, Joel, can I hold you accountable for that? Because who cares? They'll say yes. Right? Or if we miss that deadline, you're okay if I just kind of bring it to your attention. If you're skittish on it, they're going to say yes. And then if Joel misses the deadline, I can call Joel out because Joel told me he would, and then he didn't, and then it becomes the next priority, right? So that's the importance of when questions and kind of how they play out in the real world. Who questions? I think it's clarity. How many people have ever lost a deal because there were voices in the background chirping, and they didn't know who the influencers were? Right? We might ask who the decision makers are. Do we ever ask, well, who else are you going to that influences the decision? And invite them to talk to you also, or invite them into a conference call. Okay. We're pretty simple. Where do you want to open for business? Where questions are pretty straightforward. The why questions, I don't think are asked enough. So why questions are all to establish motive. Why is that important to you? You said this and that, but you didn't say the other things that I was listening for. Why? Why is that? All right. You're trying to establish motive, right? So people buy businesses because of the why. Don't they? Not about the how. It's not about the what. Okay. You got to get to the why. And there's only one way you can get to the why, which is ask why.
Open-ended
You
question.
guys are all better than that. Ask why. Why? 2-year-olds know that, right? Why? Okay, you gotta regress to the age of 2 and kind of get to the why. Okay. Now, once you got to the why, then I think the how questions become really important, right? Because the business is the how, right? How are we going to do this? This is how they get to what they're looking to achieve is the business. The business is a how and a what. It's not a why. Make sense? Right? So you just add these all together and ask them at the right times, and boom, you're this masterful recruiter and a force that you're unleashing onto the world of recruiting and entrepreneurs who don't stand a chance with your powers of persuasion or something like that. Okay. Now the other, now we're going to talk about intelligent closed-end questions. I love rating scale. So, so Tara's on the phone, like we use rating scale in normal conversation. She wants to watch a chick flick. I want to watch something where a lot of things blow up, right? So I'll go to I'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to watch your absolutely abysmal chick flicks where Russell Crowe is trying to be funny? And if anybody knows about Russell Crowe, funny isn't even on the radar screen, right? Okay. And then she might say, well, it's a 3. Great, because I'm at a 7 for blowing stuff up, and then kind of therefore I win. But if she was at an 8 and I was at a 7, I would concede, right? So that's, rating scale to get the clarity. Multiple choice questions, right? Rank order. It's like when a lot of times when they tell us what they're looking to achieve. We don't know what the priorities are. It's okay to ask, hey, rank order these according to priority. What's the most important to the least important? So I can get inside your head and understand. And maybe the ones at the bottom, are not need to have. Maybe they're wish list stuff, but they would make a decision without it. Again, more questions, more clarity. And then dates. So that's another open, by when? By when will this occur? So questions on that? Okay. So those are all the interview tools in your toolbox. Now we're going to talk about how we can pull them out of their toolbox in a real world situation, and we'll get into role play. Okay. So everybody thank Corey Bowman because he's going to step out of obscurity and he's going to be my role play partner for today. For those of you that don't know Corey and I have worked together now. We've known each other for over 20 years. He hired me when he was a partner at Pita Pit, and then we've worked together on various projects. And today he's the driving force between Pliables. And if anybody checked the newspaper, assuming there was such a thing, about Pliables over the weekend, they got taken out for a nice sizable sum. And a lot of that is to do with Corey's efforts on the recruitment side, generating 3 deals or more a month. So thank you, Corey, for that. So here's what we're going to go back to using the chat bar again, or the chat little box where it says send a message. So when people are objecting to what it is your business is or what you're showing them, maybe if you're a broker, what are they saying? Like, what are the objections that kind of stump you a little bit or get you stuck? So I'll start. Like, I can't make enough money. What else? Sorry, I have to go. Oh, that's not an objection. That's Leslie signing off. Hi, Leslie.
That could be an objection, though.
I'll turn it into an objection. Yeah, I don't want to give up my job. Great. A resale is not a profitable, is not worth anything. So, Christian, let me, you unmute? Come off mute. Flush that out for me.
Sure. When if you're ever dealing with a resale, I mean, the hardest resales to sell are the one that are train wrecks, right? And every one of us.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes the whole is worth less than the sum of the parts.
Yeah,
right?
we've all got them, right? We got some
Yes.
that make crap piles of money, and some that are train wrecks. And the candidates that are always, that resale doesn't make money, I wouldn't pay $1 for it, which is totally crap.
Got it. Okay. Okay. There's a lot of objections around stability and opportunity cost for the job. Well, let's start with this. I already make $250K. So Corey, why don't you be the guy that makes $250K, and then I will be Pliables. I'll be you. Why not? I'll be Corey.
Here we go.
Okay, but your name is Corey. My name is Joe, and I'll be Pliables recruiter, and then you be somebody who's making $250. That's looking hard at opportunity cost of keeping your own job. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I've been thinking. See, I already make 250 grand.
Yeah.
A year. So I'll at least need to replace my income. I mean, is that realistic?
Okay. So he's asking me a yes/no question. And then let's assume that's an illegal earnings claim. That's nice baiting me, Corey. A tasty little morsel like me wouldn't last 5 minutes in the pen. So I'm not going to answer that question the way you asked it. So I'll turn it back. And now we're going to work on the 250. Corey, what did you find that a typical Pliables earns?
What is
you
it?
talked to a couple franchisees. You've run some numbers.
I spoke to multiple franchise candidates, and if my math is correct, an average Pliables might make more like 180 to 190.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then your research would say you probably get on 1 or 2 to replace income, right?
Right, and I'm a conservative guy, so maybe 3. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the 250 to 190. There's other ways to make money in business too, right? There's write-offs, there's tax incentives and such, right? But let's call it 2. You'd be more than making that, right?
Okay.
Okay. So my question would be, how long would it take you to get a couple operations open?
Well, based upon what I've heard, it might take, depending on the availability of real estate, maybe 18 months.
Okay, so 18 months. Okay, so 2 locations in 18 months, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
That
so
would be going hard.
okay, so So if you have 2 locations, 18 months, it sounds like your research is saying the run rate after 18 months will be more than you're making now. Okay.
True.
Okay. Another question I have for you, so let's assume you're making 360, right? If you open the 2 based on your math,
Yep.
what's a business like that worth? Like if you turned around to sell it, what would it be worth?
Well, let's see.
What an average
360,
business sells for?
2.5, 3 times. So, let's talk about $1 million.
Okay, $1 million, right? And how much would you have into it?
Maybe at that point, maybe 800,000.
Okay. So you have 200 in equity.
Yep.
Okay, so you made after 18 months, your run rate is 200 in equity and 360 in cash flow, and your opportunity cost is 250,000 for 18 months. Is it worth it?
Well, that's a good point. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah, it might be.
And that's, that would be the interview technique. You find like if you're trying to get people through numbers, or pardon me, through emotions, numbers is a good way to do it. Like nobody freaks out over the number 5, but they freak out over security. So much you can turn its numbers. Let's see. Reading, I need the stability of my job. Okay. How about role play with you? You want to be the person who needs the stability?
Sure. I need
Okay.
stability. I need to know when I'm making my money and
So
can I pay my
let's
bills.
unpack that for a second, right?
Okay.
So
Mhm.
remember, there's conversations that are going on in the background that drive the conversation in the foreground,
Mhm.
right? So,
Right.
so if we were to unpack that, anybody, what is she really like? Unpack it. Is it stability or is it something else?
I have to have a stable income and I have to know when the money's coming in. And because my husband is wanting to know
Well,
if we lose the income I have. Yeah.
so right. Then what's the obvious follow-up question? If you heard that, I'm going to ask anybody. So you hear now, Rena, you're going to be the buyer, right? And I'm going to invite anybody in here. You can put in the text box, or you could just chime it. Okay, I need stability or income. What's the obvious clarifying follow-up question? How much money does it take
Right.
to give you stability and security?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so now I ask the question, how much money does it take, Rena, to get you stability and security?
Right.
No,
You're
say it.
just
'Cause I'm not done yet.
300,000 a year.
Okay, 300,000. And then what's the next follow-up question?
Um,
By when? By when do you need to make that 300 grand so you're stable and secure?
okay.
Might not be day one. I don't want to get in her head and assume it's day one. I want her to say it. It could
Right.
be day 180. We don't know because we're not in her head, right? So she doesn't want stability and she doesn't want security. What she wants? She wants her picture of what stability and security looks like over there, right? Otherwise, we're going to set her up, right, to try to solve a problem called security and stability and what it looks like in my bald head. Because I'm not going to be in her head, okay? I'm going to force her into my head. And if I force her into my head, first of all, nobody should ever live 5 minutes in my head. I don't wish it on anybody. But even if they could, I would tell you, don't do it.
Well-
But we got to get into her head.
So, Joe, sometimes those conversations become uncomfortable because we don't know the dynamics of the relationships they have, these other people who are talking to them. So they sometimes will not divulge that kind of information to us on the front side anyway.
So I hear what you're saying. And, that reminds me of one other skill, masterful skill that masterful recruiters have that other people seem to not. Here's where I'm going to compliment my wife in a second, right? So Tara, what's the one skill that you have I call it your dark gift?
Oh, thank you, Joe, and I appreciate that very nice intro. I heard that earlier. And hi, everybody. I crack people open. So
And why can you crack people open?
I
There's something underneath
intuitively
that.
ask them open-ended questions.
No, but the
and
reason they'll tell you is because you're safe.
right.
People see you as safe.
Thank you. Yes.
So Rini, if you're not getting that information, it's okay, right? I find people will tell you anything if they think it's safe, right? So we just got to work on being safe. Now, how do you, though, there's one technique so everybody will always experience you safe all the time. You know what that is? Don't have an agenda. If they think you're trying to sell them, like, yeah, Tara's Audi, was turning, she had a nice little Audi. It's kind of had its day. We call it the sketch car. So we just got another car for Tara, and we had the horrible experience. It's worse than I ever remember is going to a car lot, right? And then buying a car. It is as bad as I could ever remember it being. It's not even. You think I told those vultures anything? What my budget is, what my monthly payment's going to be? You think I gave them anything? Nothing. I would sit on my hands, I'd pucker like a fish, and I would only answer the questions I asked because they weren't safe. And then you buy your car, and that's kind of like the end of it, right? So the point is, when people are buying a business, often, Rini, they don't see as safe, right? Because they think it's a buy-sell transaction a lot of times. But if they see it as like, look, they're joining a family and it's not right for everybody, it's a club, right? It's not an entitlement. So that's the kind of, and the values. I happen to, I was going through your value statement as an organization today, as a matter of fact. Irina's with Spoiled Rotten Photography. It's a great emerging growth business model, great economics, and it's a values-driven company. Whoa. Was that me? Oh, it's a values-driven company. So that is the kind of stuff people see safe. But if you just be safe, you can ask those questions. And the other thing would be, one way to be safe would be ask permission. So another Cialdini methodology is, it's not what he would say, it's not what you say or what you ask that's important. It's what you say or ask before you say and ask it is what's important. Yes. So I could say, Rainey, can I have the permission just to ask you anything? And a lot of people would say yes, right? Or you could say, Rainey, have I ever exhibited anything other than wanting what's in your best interest? You can say no. Okay. Then can I have the permission to just ask you something that might make you a little uncomfortable? Sure. And you can ask.
Could you qualify it too with, you don't have to answer this question, but
Yeah. Don't feel, yeah, that's another good one. Don't feel like you have to answer this, but, right? And they always do. Yeah. I find this isn't a Cialdini principle. If you ask a straight question, people will give you a straight answer, generally. Max, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you. Okay, so that's kind of like the role plays that we're going. So I'm just going to kind of open it to Q&A, or if anybody has stories, where good interview technique kind of won the day. Let's talk about it.
I'll share one. Rainey, this may help you. I always say, as a friend, let's put the buying the business aside and let's just talk like let's just, as your friend, you really want to this is a very big decision. So, that's how I kind of break down the barrier. That might help you. I kind of say, look, as a friend, I'm going to ask you a question. If I was just your friend, here's what I would tell you, and here's what I would ask.
Now, Tara, that will only work if you show up as a friend, right?
True.
Right.
True.
So there's that baseline you got to establish even before you go there. But one of your dark gifts is you make friends at like breakneck speed.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. When I tell you dark gifts, I'm going to share a story. We go to pickleball tournaments, right? So we like to watch the professional pickleball players play, and we were at a tournament I go to use the restroom. So what am I going? 2 minutes? I go 2 minutes. I come back. She's sitting in between two professional pickleball players discussing their wedding plans. And I'm like, how does that happen in just 2 minutes that I am gone, that she's wedged in between these two spouses talking about their engagement and helping them set their wedding plans? Like, that's the dark gift that we're talking about. So Tara can go places that I don't, like, normal human beings can't go. But I do think the techniques are the right ones. Yes.
You actually, Joe, you bring up an interesting point, because I always say about, listen, I'm very sociable, but I always say that my wife has never met a conversation she doesn't like. And what I mean by that is that she's just very good at extracting information out of people. And just from a franchise recruitment standpoint, I've done this a long time also. I'm still a big believer that people only buy things from people they like. If they don't like you, it's very, very difficult to build trust and build a rapport with people. Right. So not only is this good for the prospect asking these questions, but from a franchise recruitment standpoint, I also want to know whether they can afford it or not. I also want to know if we can meet their needs in terms of what they're trying to get out of a business. And, right. And if I'm pre-qualifying or disqualifying at that particular step in the process, I'm probably saving myself time and saving them also if they're the right or the wrong fit. So I think it's critically important to get the answers to those questions. And I think, to your point about Tara, when they feel safe and they feel like they're just having a casual conversation, there's no agenda, they're going to be very open to just sharing more.
That's very good feedback, Joel.
Well. Yeah.
And Damon says everything but hallelujah. You got an agreed and an exclamation point, and the agreed was in capitals, which I'm going to take as shouting. Okay. Excellent. Who else?
I just think it's important to just be authentic, right? I mean,
That's a really good point. So talk to me about being authentic.
Well, I think it sort of encompasses everything we've talked about today, but I think you just got to bring down the defenses right off the bat, and just share some stories personally about how you got into this and why you do it and what you love about it. But at the end of the day, I always preface everything with at the end of the day, understand no is a perfectly acceptable answer, and you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right. That's very good. Now, Christian, let's talk about authenticity for a second. Because I'll tell you, I mystery shop people, right? And I've had people tell me, well, I really try to be authentic.
Yep.
And my answer is, good luck with that. Like, authentic isn't something you try to be, right? How would you describe somebody who has to try to be authentic? Somebody who's inauthentic, right?
Yep.
So if you're being authentic, there's no try. You just be, right? Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that out because that's really important. But it's not a cover up for being a phony, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day,
thank you.
I can't promise you're going to like every answer I'm going to give you. I'm just going to lay it out here. Here's how it is. You got to make a decision whether it's for you or not. I'm not going to sit here and try and convince, because if I got to convince you, it's not a fit anyways.
And then there's a credit to you, Christian. I don't know you very well, but you kind of land on me as somebody who would be very bad at being very inauthentic. Like, in other words, you don't really have a lot of phony bones over there going on.
I'm not smart enough to remember all the lines.
Right. I got it. Yeah. And that's why, people, I'll tell you, authenticity covers up a lot of poor skills.
It's lipstick on a pig. That's what it is right here.
All right. Very good.
And
now, Jason, I saw you do this. What did you just hear? I'll jump on you 1 second, Raymond. Let me grab the Jason first.
I was actually just adjusting my AirPod because it was falling out of my ear. And it was itchy. So
basically you're dampening the entire room's vibe. Yeah, Rainey, I should have called on you first.
It's a full-time job.
That's okay. So for me, it takes time. And I've had people try to sell to me, and the really inauthentic ones will push and rush and then want to hang up the phone fairly quickly.
Yes. So
I try to give that time for a relationship to start. And sometimes I get in trouble for that. Like, oh, you stayed on the phone too long with that person. And I was like, well, maybe so. Maybe I do stay on the phone too long, but at least that I don't feel like that I can disqualify them unless I really know what that why is.
Right. That's right. And sometimes, depending on who it is we're talking to, it takes a second to get the why, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So very good. Okay. So that's so that's what we have for this kind of week. Any ahas or insights or takeaways? Put them in the chat box, because in my opinion, takeaways are community property, and somebody needs to take away what you took away also. So nobody learned nothing. Great. That's really motivating for me. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. It was a fun session. Christian's throwing me a bone. Thank you, Damon. Thank you for that. Joel, excellent. Okay. Well done, everybody. I really appreciate this group, and I really appreciate the interactivity. I think we're establishing a kind of a good, trusting vibe, as a group, and and we don't all know each other, but I like the risks that you guys take in sharing and going off microphones. So that's real helpful. Okay, remember, there's no money for these sessions, but they're not free. You pay it forward by doing one random act of kindness for somebody else. And then lastly, Jason and I work together. Jason's our lead generation expert. We want one more client for Jason. We just started with Spoiled Rotten Photography in the process of helping with the brand story and designing their campaigns. Now we want one more client over the next couple of months to kind of round out our capacity. So if anybody is a franchisor or knows a franchisor that's looking for expert lead generation, and you want to make that your random act of kindness, I would appreciate it. All right, everybody, we're going to be meeting the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. So that's 14 days from now. 14 and 11 is 25. So we will be meeting together again, same time, September 25th. And I'll try to remember to get the reminders out earlier. I'll put something in my calendar that seems to be missing for me to get more reminders out to you. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Joe.